we are told on so many ways in this country that you have to obey the law. The law is the law, even though laws can be so complicated at the federal level that you'll have different attorneys have different interpretations of them. And this has been a problem for a long time. We have an enormously complicated legal system on many issues. On immigration, we have a legal system that is complicated by the fact that the federal government decides that the laws no longer count. Immigration law doesn't really matter. I know they say, oh, but what about this? And they'll point to all these things. At the end of the day, you have millions and millions of people who are in the country without legal permission to be here. You have millions more who have entered. The number right now, Clay, it's got to be something over 6 million, I think is a good estimate in 3 years of Biden.
Yeah.
We're talking about 3 million. I'm sorry, 2 million a year over 3 years on average. Not going to get any better. In fact, the numbers look like they're getting as bad in terms of illegal crossings as they've ever been. Here is Bill Malugin over at Fox News, Clay, announcing over just the last few days how many encounters, meaning people being detained at the border because they've entered illegally, did they see? Play. This is from Customs and Border Patrol. Play it.
We are getting some new staggering numbers from our CBP contacts telling us that between Friday and Monday, there were over 35,000 migrant encounters at our southern border. You do the math on that, that's almost 9,000 every single day. Astronomical numbers approaching record highs.
Clay, approaching record highs. 35,000 people. I mean, a pretty good-sized sports arena full of people who are all entering the country illegally. They're not going through the ports of entry. They're not going through the normal process. A lot of them will end up in major cities like New York. We see what that does to New York City. The Biden administration, I think people have to recognize this is an active decision that they've made to allow this scam of asylum seeking to continue. And by the time that people will be able to cast judgment in next November on this process, if they know about it, we're probably going to have 8 million people who have entered the United States illegally in one presidential term.
Yeah. There was, and I don't know if you saw it Sunday in the New York Times, Buck. I think it was a front page article about the Darien Gap, which is now become one of the primary conduits to get to the United States from all of Latin America. And for people out there who don't really understand what this thing is, for a long time, the idea was you couldn't walk, let's say, from Venezuela and obviously take boats and cars and everything else because this Darien Gap region was considered to be so inhospitable that basically you would never be able to get through this jungle area because, and this is from between Colombia and Panama for people out there, and I'm not a geographic wonder star by any stretch of the imagination. But if you picture this area, and Buck, the article all about it. So the Darien Gap was this supposedly almost impossible to traverse area between Colombia and Panama where people could then continue their walk the rest of the way. On the Colombia side of the Darien Gap now, they have built an entire industry that basically is, I would encourage people to go read this article about what's going on there, but they will give you, they basically have taken over Colombia they're not military, but it's like a gang basically, and they provide security, but you have to pay a fee to traverse the Darien Gap. And there are different ways you can go. Like you can hire a porter, you can hire boats, you can get somebody who will set up tents. They sell food along the way. It's a massive industry that they have created, and it is filled with hundreds of thousands of people now that are constantly walking through en route to our southern border.
I mean, I think about this and what the incentives are for people, let's say and there are illegals coming in from all over the world, 160 plus countries represented. But if you look at this, you're, let's say, a migrant, one of the countries where we've had a fair number of migrants come in would be Venezuela, right? And now there's some countries are under a special, there's a dispensation because of either a natural disaster. I think that was in Central America, a few countries for a while. I mean, there's specifics for each nation, but let's just generally speaking, if you're from a South American country, doesn't matter which one, you can try to, and you have no tie into America, no family here already. You can try to go through the legal immigration process, and it will take you years, and you may be unsuccessful. Or you can do what you're talking about, where you just get into America.
Yep.
And under the Biden administration, there is no notion of punishment, or there's nothing punitive about entering the country illegally now. You will not be detained. You will not be told that, you've broken the law, really, not in any meaningful way. And in fact, you'll be transported somewhere, given free food, free health care. And then you'll have politicians in America demanding you be given work permits. So then you can compete with, particularly those at the lower end of the wage scale in this country, even though you're in the country illegally. It is appalling what is going on. It is contrary. We're always told, the statutes and the law, and you have to pay such attention to the law when it comes to like taxes, for example. On immigration, this stuff is being abused left and right all the time. There's constant intentional malfeasance, and you brought up the system that people have set up to get here. It's big business for the cartels now.
Yep.
Some are even saying if you add it all up, it gets to be close to even more than what they make selling fentanyl, right? And fentanyl obviously is becoming.
They say that cartel traversing of the border, to put it in context, is a bigger business than any pro sport. There is more revenue being produced. This is not talking about drugs. On the illegal crossing of the border, the cartels make more money than the NFL teams do combined. Like,
you're talking
as
about,
big as NFL football is, the cartel business to get people illegally into the country is a bigger business than the NFL is.
And over the weekend, there were videos circulating online, different news sites picking them up. Fox News had this, Daily Mail had this, of freight trains coming up from Mexico, and they are absolutely, overflowing with single adult males, I should note, not with families in these videos, single adult males who are on their way to the U.S.-Mexico border to come into the country illegally. So, the visualization of some of you have probably been stuck at a railroad crossing and a freight train. Those freight trains could just, they're like a mile long. I mean, this thing just go forever. Imagine a freight train where in every single car there are, I'm looking at the photos right now, you're talking about, 20 people, 30 people in every car, and that's just one train.
Yeah.
And they're all just getting ready to get into the country, our country, illegally. The Biden administration is only working to make this easier and more comfortable for them. They're not trying to stop it.
Yeah, and the other thing we should add on the incentive structure, jobs is one. If you come here and you have, because this article about the Darien Gap, there are women who are pregnant that decide they are going to do whatever it takes to get to the United States and have that baby. Your kid is then a citizen, and you will never be kicked out. So, again, incentive structures matter. And I want everybody out there to pretend that you are in Venezuela. You are a part of the broken socialist system of Maduro. There's probably a decent chance that you have family or friends who live in the United States now. Buck, they may not live now near you. South Florida has a huge Venezuelan population.
We have a ton of Venezuelan migrants here, yeah.
And if you knew that you had family living in the United States, this land of milk and honey, and all that it took was you getting to the southern border and getting into the United States, and that your child would then become a citizen of the United States, wouldn't you do everything in your power to get here? I would. I'm just going to be honest with you. If I were Venezuelan and I had friends and family living in the South Florida area, living anywhere, frankly, in the United States, and I was talking to them on the phone and they were saying, I'm making 40x what I was making, and my wife or girlfriend just had a baby, and I've now got an American citizen son or daughter. This is a no-brainer, and this is why, Buck, I think there needs to be a serious conversation. We have to have this conversation. Birthright citizenship.
Trump said he was going to end it in his first term. He said he was going to end it in his first term. He says he will end it in his second term. He did not end it in his first term.
Okay. But I hear hardly anybody talking about it. To me, with this debate coming up on September 27th, I think this is and again, a lot of people don't want to even think about this. The argument for birthright citizenship, I'm not talking about if you are a citizen and you're serving overseas in Korea or you're serving overseas in Germany. Your kids should certainly
Well,
be
of course,
citizens, right?
but that is what the law says. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof, meaning you are a U.S. subject abroad. You are not somebody who is a foreigner who comes here. The birthright citizenship
exists hardly anywhere in the world. You
no
can't
one does
go to
this, yeah.
Japan or China and have a baby there and then have dual citizenship because you're an American, they're also a Japanese. The legacy of this, and I researched it and wrote about it a lot in my book, Buck. This is a colonialist legacy. The idea was back in the day, if you're willing to go to Brazil and live in a colony, or you're willing to come to the United States, your kids would be British subjects because they didn't want to give up their ability to be connected to the homeland. That's why only two, I think, of the G7, America and Canada, actually have by soil citizenship. If you're born there, you become a citizen.
Right. Well, you can just think this through. If you're an American serving in, let's say, Germany, or you're an American serviceman or something, your wife gets pregnant, you have a kid there, guess what? That kid's an American. Right?
Correct,
This is very straightforward. Otherwise, you're going to have a whole problem with people. And it's true, diplomats,
or that kid is not German, right?
Yeah. And so you apply that same logic to what happens in this country, and you can see how the whole premise is wrong. I mean, the premise that you could have a foreign national not with the legal permission to be in the United States who gives birth here, and then that person is defined as an American for the purposes of law. That's wrong. And it's wrong, especially when you see the way that these birth hotels are set up, and because they've actually prosecuted people for this in California specifically, and with particularly Asian and Chinese individuals will pay to come here to have their baby here to go back to China, and then 18 years later their kid is a U.S. citizen and wants to go to Berkeley and wants and is a U.S. citizen for all intents and purposes, right? You're not. That's actually illegal. You're not allowed to do that. There's a reason why that's illegal. But the system here, the more people that get piled into the system who are illegal, the greater the weight to just do exactly what the Democrats want, which is a mass amnesty, which will forever change the American electorate. That's the plan. And people who say, "Oh, they won't be given voting rights," sure they won't, right? I mean, this is like go back, even Reagan. What was it, in '86? I think Reagan went along with an amnesty. He did. And it was one of his big regrets, he would say later on in life, because the amnesty happened, but all the border security, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So
and also, by the way, what we do know happened, Buck, is all these kids that are born here are citizens, and they'll be able to vote. So that's millions.